12 alien dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, loomed over the shattered remnants of the Rin Confederacy's defense fleet. Plasma lances carved the last few resisting cruisers into glowing debris, their dying screams lost to the silent abyss. In the war room of the High Warlord Zyrak, the battle was all but won. Victory was routine, predictable. The coalition of dominance had conquered 100 worlds using the same method of overwhelming firepower, systematic annihilation. The Vrin, like so many before them, had no answer to sheer force. And then, impossibly, the sensors flickered, a ripple in space, a distortion, an anomaly small, almost insignificant. Then, suddenly, they were there, sleek, unmarked, unlike any known warship, the human fleet. They did not emerge with a slow, lumbering crawl of slipspace drives or the violent tear of quantum breaches. They simply arrived precise, effortless, like a blade slipping between armor plates. For the first time in 1,000 campaigns, Warlord Zarak hesitated. "Identify those vessels," he growled, mandibles clicking in irritation. His tactical officers scrambled, scanning the newly arrived ships, a fleet of only 24, laughable, insignificant against the armada of the coalition. Yet something was wrong. The ships were ... wrong. No visible weapon emplacements, no traditional energy signatures, no broadcasted war banners or challenge declarations, just the cold, unyielding silence of predators moving through the dark. Then, the war room's holographic displays flickered. For an instant, the data feeds glitched impossible, given the coalition's near-infallible command network. When the displays stabilized, the human ships had already repositioned inside the coalition's defensive perimeter. That was impossible. No ship moved that fast. No fleet maneuvered with such pinpoint precision. And yet, Warlord, one of his officers choked out, eyes wide, "They are already targeting us." Zyrak's mandibles clenched. Impossible. They lack visible weapons. A ripple of light coursed along the hulls of the human vessels. A moment later, coalition battleships began to die. Not explode. Not crumple under torpedo barrages. Die. The first to go was the Verxan, a war carrier 3 miles long, its shields capable of withstanding planetary bombardments. In an instant, the entire ship simply vanished, disassembled at the molecular level, reduced to drifting atoms before its crew could even register their deaths. The coalition fleet reeled, its formations breaking apart, their weapons great, lumbering siege cannons designed for planetary impossibly fast ships weaving through their ranks. For the first time, in the heart of a battle he had believed won before it began, High Warlord Sirak felt something alien to his species. Fear in humanity had only just begun. The coalition of dominance did not innovate. It did not need to. For 1,000 years, its doctrine had remained unchanged. Overwhelm, subjugate, annihilate. Victory was a matter of brute force, a game of numbers played with monstrous warships and endless fleets. The coalition was an empire built on the simple, brutal philosophy that no enemy, no matter how advanced or determined, could stand against a storm of plasma and steel. And until this moment, they had been right. The Vrin had learned this lesson. The Tsar, the countless civilizations that had fought and died in defiance of the coalition's war machine, all had been crushed beneath the weight of superior numbers. Humanity, however, had never been invited to play that game. Earth's forward military intelligence station, Admiral Elias Varian, stood before a vast, illuminated star map. Around him, his officers worked in deliberate silence, their movements precise, efficient machines of flesh and will. The coalition had never feared humanity. That was their first mistake. For centuries, humans had remained an afterthought in the intergalactic Orderan, isolated, unremarkable species clinging to its single homeworld, expanding cautiously, never drawing attention. The coalition saw them as primitive, technologically inferior, beneath notice. That was their second mistake, because while the great empires had fought wars of attrition, hurling fleets at each other like clubs in the dark, humanity had been watching, learning, preparing, confirmed fleet positions. Varian ordered. His voice leveled. A soft hum filled the war room as holograms flickered to life. The human fleet, 24 ships in total, was already inside the coalition's perimeter, undetected. The aliens still had no idea how. They never would. Varian's second-in-command Commander Lillian Hayes studied the data streams cascading across the displays. They're responding exactly as predicted, she noted, almost bored. Standard formation shifts. No dynamic adaptation, no countermeasures. Varian nodded. Because they don't have any. The coalition had spent centuries perfecting the wrong kind of warfare. Their ships were designed to win wars through intimidation. Their weapons meant to eradicate planets, not counter an enemy that could strike before they were seen. And humanity had rewritten the art of war. Earth had prepared in secret, hiding its true capabilities behind a facade of mediocrity. While alien fleets had grown larger, human ships had grown faster. While the coalition had refined brute force, humanity had mastered precision, Their weapons did not fire crude energy bolts. They used quantum resonance disassembly, a system that bypassed shields entirely, unmaking targets at the atomic level. Their ships did not lumber through the void, they folded space itself, appearing where they were least expected. Every engagement was a surgical strike. Every maneuver was calculated weeks in advance. The Coalition had built an empire on winning wars through numbers. Humanity had made sure this war would last only hours. Varen turned to Hayes. Begin. With a single command, the future of interstellar warfare changed forever. Command Decker High Warlord Zirak S-Claws dug into the armrest of his throne-like command chair as the battle spiraled out of control. The Tyrannus was the nerve center of the Coalition fleet, a fortress of blackened durasteel, bristling with enough firepower to slag entire planets. It was meant to be untouchable, and yet, in mere seconds, it had become vulnerable. The human warships, if they could even be called that, were impossible to track. They moved like whispers in the dark, phasing in and out of sight, blinking across kilometers in the span of heartbeats. Where are they? Zirak roared, his mandibles clicking in fury. Unknown, Warlord, his tactical officer cried, his gnarled fingers skittering across the console. They're everywhere and nowhere. Our sensors, our systems, the holographic battle map flickered, distorting with interference. Human ships rippled in and out of existence, their signatures vanishing before they could be locked onto. Then the Coalition's battle network collapsed. The Tyrannus's primary sensors scrambled, replaced by a storm of artificial signals and false fleet positions. One moment, an enemy ship appeared 300 kilometers starboard by. The time weapons locked on. It had already reappeared behind them. Human electronic warfare had turned the Coalition's greatest advantage, their tactical coordination, into a liability. Zirak's secondary fleet commanders began shouting over each other, confusion taking root like a spreading infection. They're jamming all frequencies, navigation systems unresponsive. Missile guidance is blind. A human voice cut through the noise, clear, unshaken, perfectly calm. Your fleet is already lost. Zirak's mandibles snapped shut. Who dares? The voice belonged to Admiral Elias Varian. It had been transmitted directly into their internal communications network, something that should have been impossible. And yet, here it was. You are insignificant, human. A slight pause. Then, Varian watched the battlefield unfold with the detached focus of a chess master watching the final moves of a game he had already won. 12 Coalition dreadnoughts, hundreds of cruisers, tens of thousands of enemy personnel. It would take exactly 4 minutes and 22 seconds to render them all combatant. Status, he asked. Phase distortions active. Commander Hayes replied smoothly. Enemy targeting systems are blind. They're firing into empty space. On the main display, the battlefield was chaos. The Coalition's monstrous warships unleashed massive volleys of plasma, ion torpedoes and rail cannon barrages, all missing. Every shot passed harmlessly through the void, chasing false echoes left by human warships a full second behind their actual positions. The Valkyrie and her sister ships glided through the storm, untouched, moving with a grace no Coalition vessel could match. Engagement protocol, Hayes asked. Varian didn't hesitate. Initiate surgical cascade. Kill stroke first. Real strike came without warning. A single pulse of focused graviton disruption struck the Coalition battleship's up. The warship froze mid-maneuver. Not exploded, not disabled, just stopped as if time itself had hesitated. Then, in eerie silence, the ship's molecular bonds ruptured, its structure peeling apart as if it had been unmade from the inside out. No explosion, no energy discharge, just quiet annihilation. On board the Tyrannus, Zirak watched in horror. What was that? No one had an answer. And then it happened again. Another ship and another, each one erased in a heartbeat, as if they had never existed. Panic spread. Coalition ships broke formation, their survival instincts overriding any sense of duty. And that was their undoing. Varian watched as human interceptors wove between the chaos, deploying micro-drone subroutines that embedded themselves into the exposed flanks of retreating vessels. Signal collapse in 5 seconds, Hayes murmured. The drones activated. Coalition power grids overloaded. Entire ships went dark, drifting lifelessly as their systems failed. The mighty Tyrannus, the jewel of the fleet, was now alone. This wasn't war. This was High Warlord, one of his officers choked out. We must surrender. The word had never been spoken in a Coalition war room before. A final transmission crackled over their remaining channels. Varian's voice, once again, coldly professional. Your command vessel is the last one standing. Do you wish to continue? Zirak's claws curled into fists. His entire species' military doctrine, everything they had believed in, everything they had built, was being dismantled before his very eyes. Answer me, High Warlord. Varian pressed. Do you wish to continue? Zirak looked around the bridge. His officers refused to meet his gaze. His empire's greatest fleet was gone. He exhaled, mandibles clicking in defeat. His next words came slowly, painfully. ... No. He closed his eyes. We surrender. Varian's reply was instant. Acknowledged. The war was over, and it had taken less than 5 hours. High orbit over Vrin, Primeth bridge of the Tyrannus had fallen silent. For the first time in 1,000 years, the coalition of dominance stood on the brink of total defeat. The mighty armada that had conquered 100 worlds had been reduced to wreckage in mere hours. High Warlord Zirak sat motionless in his command chair, his mandibles clicking in a slow, uneven rhythm. Around him, his officers refused to speak, their gazes fixed on a tactical display, a display that now showed only one active coalition vessel, his own. The Tyrannus stood alone in a battlefield littered with silent, disabled warships and drifting debris. His fleet, his empire's proudest warriors, had been dismembered with surgical precision. No enemy had ever done this before. No enemy had ever fought like this before. Warlord, his tactical overseer finally spoke, voice strained. The human fleet has surrounded us. Zirak's mandibles flared. He had seen it happening in real time, the way those impossibly fast ships had cut off every possible escape route, closing in with the deliberate inevitability of a noose tightening around a throat. It was flawless execution, something even his best strategists had failed to counter. And now the noose was fully tightened. Zirak inhaled deeply, his lungs expanding in preparation for one last order, one last stand. Power up then. His displays flickered. A voice cut through his internal command network, direct, cold, human. Your weapons are offline. High Warlord. Zirak's mandibles locked in place. Impossible, he hissed. Yet the evidence was in front of him. The Tyrannus's weapon grids were dark. Their power relays were failing. The entire command system from torpedo guidance to shield modulation had been seized. Not by damage, not by brute force, by code. They had hijacked his ship's system. With a single silent strike, humanity had done something unthinkable, rendered the most powerful warship in the galaxy completely defenseless. His mind raced. There had to be an option. He turned to his tactical overseer. Override their control. Reboot our. The overseer shook his head. We can't, Warlord. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his voice trembling. Zirex, we are the coalition of dominance. We do not. A second voice, calm, precise, cut through the bridge's failing comm systems. Your command is over. High Warlord. Flagship Valkyrie Gadal Elias Varen stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the battlefield on the main tactical display. The Tyrannus had been neutralized. Final stage complete. His bridge crew was silent, waiting for the last command. They will try to resist, Commander Lillian Hayes murmured beside him. Varian nodded. For a moment, even now, the Tyrannus's failing systems were trying to bypass the human override, attempting to wrest control back. But the coalition's entire war doctrine, its strategies, its weapons, its defenses had been built for a different era, an era that had ended tonight. Open a direct channel, Varian ordered. A soft chime confirmed the link was established. He didn't speak immediately. He wanted Zirak to feel the silence, the weight of it. Then, with quiet finality, he spoke. Your weapons are disabled. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire no longer has control of this system. The response was delayed. Varian imagined the Zirak grappling with the impossible, trying to assemble a strategy from ruins. Then the alien's growling voice came through. What do you want, human? Varian allowed the slightest pause, letting the truth sink in. Your unconditional surrender, leaving deep gouges in the metal. He had known war since the moment he hatched. He had stood at the forefront of countless invasions, watched entire species burn, felt the rush of conquest. But this was something else. This was not war. This was dissection. Humanity had not conquered them. They had removed them, precisely, effortlessly. They had done what the coalition had believed impossible. They had rewritten the rules of engagement, and they had done it in a single night. Zirak's gaze flicked across the bridge. His officers, his warriors once so proud, so sure of their supremacy were. They knew. The fight was over. What terms? Zirak finally growled. The human admiral's voice remained calm. Full demilitarization. Immediate withdrawal from all occupied territories. The coalition of dominance is finished. Zirak's fists clenched. You expect us to dismantle our entire empire? A pause. Then no, Varian said. We already have. Zirak froze. The realization hit like a collapsing star. This wasn't just the loss of a battle. Humanity had planned for this exact moment. Even as he sat in this chair, the coalition's other fleets spread across dozens of occupied worlds were falling. Their communication networks had collapsed. Their command structures had been severed. There was no resistance left to rally. The coalition of dominance did not exist anymore. Not in any way that mattered. Zirak lowered his head. It was done. Very well. Across the battlefield, human recovery teams swept through the wreckage, disabling any remaining resistance. And the war, if it had ever truly been a war, was over. On board the Valkyrie, Admiral Varian watched as the once mighty coalition came to terms with its own extinction. His fleet had suffered 0 losses. His crews had fired no conventional weapons. And yet, in 5 hours, Humanity had accomplished what no other species in the galaxy had ever dared dream of. Total systemic victory. Commander Hayes stepped beside him. "Orders, sir." Varian watched the last Coalition warships go dark. The era of brute force warfare had ended. Now, the galaxy would learn a new doctrine. "Send the signal," Varian said quietly. "Let the galaxy know." A pause. Then, with quiet understanding, Hayes activated the transmission. A single message, sent across every known system. A message that would change history forever. "The war is over. Humanity has won." 5 hours after victory, the battlefield was eerily quiet. No more weapons fire. No more maneuvering fleets. Just the drifting remnants of an empire that once ruled with absolute certainty, now reduced to wreckage, flickering lights, and the cold silence of surrender. For the first time in 1,000 years, the coalition of dominance had no standing fleet in a contested system. For the first time in recorded history, humanity had rewritten the art of war. Coalition command ship Tyranus surrender protocols, underwhere High Warlord Zyrak stood at the center of his crippled bridge, surrounded by the silent, disgraced officers of his command. Every screen, every display, every system once used to conquer and command was now under human control. The Admiral's voice still lingered in his thoughts. "No, we already have." He should have fought to the last breath. That was the Coalition way. But what was there to fight with? Their weapons had been stripped away. Their ships had been dismantled with a key. Their tactics, their war doctrine, their entire way of waging war obsolete in the face of something terrifyingly superior. This was no simple defeat. This was an eradication of everything they had ever known about power. One of his officers, a junior strategist, finally broke the silence. What do we do now, Warlord?" Zyrak turned, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the ruined bridge. He looked at his broken command, at the once proud warriors whose very existence had been defined by dominance, and now they were relics, outmatched, outthought, outmaneuvered. What was left? What was a warlord in a world where war was no longer his to control? His mandibles clicked softly as he uttered the only answer that remained. "We wait." The officer hesitated. "For what?" Zyrak exhaled slowly. "For whatever comes next." Human flagship Valkyrie conference room. Watching as his officers studied the final battle telemetry was perfect. No wasted shots. No unnecessary destruction. No collateral damage. A total victory without a single wasted resource. Across the table, Fleet Intelligence Director Adrian Seens leaned back, shaking his head in quiet amazement. "They never saw it coming," he murmured. "We broke their entire empire in 5 hours." Varian nodded. "They relied on brute force, on overwhelming numbers. They thought war was about who could endure the most casualties, who could throw the most ships into a fight." Seens exhaled. "And instead, they ran into this." He gestured to the display of battle with no true battles. A war that had been won before it even started. Commander Lillian Hayes, ever the realist, crossed her arms. "We rewrote the rules of engagement tonight." The room was silent. Then she added, "But what happens next?" Seens gave a dry chuckle. "What happens next? Every species in the galaxy just learned that their fleets, their armies, their entire military doctrines are useless. That's what happens next." Varian turned to look at the battle display, then out the viewport, where the remains of the once invincible Coalition armada drifted like dead leaves in the wind. For humanity, for the galaxy, for war itself, it was a paradigm shift. By the time the battle had ended, hundreds of species across the intergalactic networks had already seen the transmissions. The most feared empire in the known universe had been dismantled in 5 hours. No planetary bombardments, no extended sieges, no bloody campaigns stretching across generations, just silent, surgical elimination. And the galaxy reeled. Reaction from neutral systems and the distant core worlds. The neutral governments, once terrified of the Coalition's expansion, now found themselves grappling with a new reality. If humanity could do this to the Coalition, then what else were they capable of? Some leaders scrambled for diplomatic channels, eager to align themselves with this terrifying new power. Others watched from the shadows, desperately revising their own defensive doctrine. The Coalition had been the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known, and in a single night it had been turned into an afterthought. Reaction from remaining Coalition fortress, the remnants of the Coalition's scattered fleets, isolated command posts. Surviving generals tried to rally, but their empire wasn't just beat, it was incapacitated. The humans had left them nothing to fight with. Every communication relay had been severed. Every fleet formation had been dismantled. Every fortified system had been rendered defenseless. There was no more war to fight, only the aftermath. Reaction from human command back aboard the Valkyrie. Admiral Varian and his staff convened one final time before preparing for their next phase. "The galaxy will never be the same," Seens muttered. Varian glanced at the tactical readouts. "But they'll fear us now," Hayes added. Varian met her gaze. "They feared the Coalition for 1,000 years." She nodded slowly. "So what happens next?" Varian exhaled. "Now," he said. "Now, we build something better." The galaxy had no dominant empire. For the first time, War had been redefined. No longer a contest of attrition, no longer a game of brute force. Now, war belonged to those who could think faster, strike smarter, and control information with precision. And humanity had just proven they were the masters of that battlefield. Across the intergalactic networks, one transmission was played over and over again. A single, simple message: the war is over, humanity has won. But behind those words was something even more profound, a warning and a promise. The age of conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun. The battle was over. The wreckage of the once mighty coalition fleet drifting lifelessly through space. The embers of their millennia-old military doctrine had been snuffed out, not in a drawn-out campaign, but in a single, surgical operation lasting only 5 hours. Admiral Elias Varian stood alone on the bridge of the Valkyrie, gazing out at the debris field. It wasn't pride that filled him, it wasn't relief. It was understanding. Wars were never truly won. Even in victory, there were always unseen consequences. And right now, across the vast reaches of space, those consequences were already unfolding. For centuries, the coalition of dominance had been the immovable force at the center of interstellar affairs. Even for those who despised its brutal conquests, it had at least provided predictability. Now, that predictability was gone. Former coalition systems, this news of the coalition's defeat spread. Its vast empire fractured overnight. Some sectors descended into chaos, with warlords and surviving admirals fighting for control over the shattered remains of their once mighty dominion. Others, recognizing the futility of resistance, surrendered preemptively, broadcasting desperate pleas for negotiations with the humans. But what unnerved them most wasn't just their defeat, it was the nature of it. No mass bombardments, no planetary invasions, no cities turned to ash. The humans had rewritten how war was fought not through destruction, but through absolute, undeniable control. They had rendered conventional warfare irrelevant, and that terrified everyone. And the unknown in neutral systems, political leaders scrambled to redefine their alliances. For decades, many had feared the coalition's expansion, believing resistance was futile. Now they feared humanity. Some sought diplomatic ties immediately, eager to align themselves with a new apex power, before they found themselves on the wrong side of history. Others, more cautious, watched from the shadows, wondering if the humans could dismantle the coalition in a single battle. Who would stop them from doing it again? Humanity had won a war, but in doing so, they had become the new unknown. And history had proven one thing, time and time again: the unknown breeds fear. The mood was quiet, measured. They had done what once seemed impossible. They had toppled the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known, and yet there was no celebration. Fleet Intelligence Director Adrian Seens broke the silence. "We just turned the entire galaxy upside down." Commander Lillian Hayes exhaled. "It needed to happen." Seens nodded. "Yeah, but now we're in a different kind of war." Varian folded his arms. "We proved brute force is obsolete, but that doesn't mean we won't be challenged. The galaxy has seen what we can do. Some will want to fight us just to prove we can be beaten." The room was quiet. Then Colonel Ethan Cale, a strategist who had been instrumental in designing the operation, finally spoke. "We changed the game," he said, "but the game isn't over. It's just different now." Seens leaned forward. "So what happens next?" Varian looked at them all. "We prepare," he said simply. "For what?" Hayes asked. Varian exhaled. "For whatever comes next." New challenges began to emerge. Some planets, freed from coalition rule, embraced their new reality, turning to humanity as a stabilizing force. Others, resenting the power shift, saw this as an opportunity to reclaim lost independence, no longer fearing retaliation from the now defunct coalition. More concerning, intelligence reports suggested certain surviving coalition admirals had gone into hiding, rallying remnants of their fleets in distant, uncharted systems. They were adapting, and that meant only one thing: humanity's war wasn't over. Varian sat alone in his personal quarters, reviewing the latest reports. The galaxy was changing. The war had lasted 5 hours, but its impact would last for generations. As he scrolled through the intelligent data, a priority transmission interrupted his screen. It was from a classified reconnaissance unit stationed on the far edge of known space. He opened the file. And then, for the first time since the war, he felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not relief. The coalition hadn't just vanished. They had and in their retreat, they had made contact. The intercepted transmission was brief, but it said everything. Humanity is not the only force that can evolve. Varian exhaled, closing his eyes for a moment. The galaxy had changed, but war would always remain. And the next one had already begun. The age of conventional warfare was over. The age of humanity's precision, adaptability, and control had begun. But as the last embers of the conflict faded, one undeniable truth emerged. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had set a precedent, and the galaxy would never be the same again.